Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show, live here in Ojai, California, with Somatic movement teacher David Hurwith. It's an honor. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Yes.
David, I wanted you to talk to the audience about a time in your life when you were filled with darkness and you were not in great shape. And maybe a mini awakening that you can talk about that puts you on a path to your career, to enlightenment, most importantly, peace.
Well, let's see. Many days between 3:30 and 4:30 in the morning, I am an obsessive thinker. And you know the word hypnagogic and hypnopompic? They're the times between being awake and going to sleep, and being asleep and awakening, and they're very powerful times. I personally, and I know lots of people, aren't able to. I have obsessive thoughts. I'm not able to change my thoughts. I just think about the same thing that's there, and many of us have that. And the thing about that is not to distract yourself from it. And the device you're holding is the greatest distraction ever, but to go through it, to go into it. And that's my real interest, is going into our experience and finding enough support or personal power, and I say that sort of in the Carlos Castaneda way of personal power, to go into the difficult experiences. I could name different times in my life, but I don't have to go far. And the thing that happens if I really stay with it and if I go through what's going on is that something comes, a way to try and deal with it, a way to look at it differently, a way to, even if I just obsess on it and I get done with obsessing on the negative, that really changes things rather than distracting myself from it.
So, have you always looked towards the light, though? I'm talking about how did you cultivate that ability? Because sometimes
only through desperation, and I'm cultivating it every night. But there have been some experiences that gave me some of a guidepost, if you will, to that is a possibility, and that I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and I watched a lot of television as a kid. Distraction and that kind of in-between state of being zombied out is part of our culture in America, and then and there's something useful about it. I feel like when you're distracted, sometimes, again, some kind of internal process can happen that can help, but it's also an addiction, clearly an addiction. And at a certain point, you have to decide if you want to live fully or if you want to live nicely. And I'm for the live fully version path.
Can you talk about one of the signposts early on?
I had a teacher who taught creative writing. His name was Ken Brody. I went to and in high school, and he was a great writer, and I'd go to his house and we'd all sit at those old cast iron typewriters and type and read to each other what we wrote, and he would read The Recognitions by William Gaddis out loud, which is a very, and all that book is really, it has different selves, and as I look at it now, I realize that one of my interests is to not say that the self, there's one self and that it's static. I want to be transformed by what I'm experiencing, and I want to listen to different parts of myself in the midst of being banal, and Lord knows I can be banal. There's something inside of there which has a more profound or visceral interest. And so in the midst of being a fool, I could do something interesting. Anyway, he had written a book called Nice Going God. And
Comma God.
I don't know. The comma is a good question. You'll have to.
I mean, that's kind of a cool name, actually.
He was a very interesting. He'd sold the advance to 9 different publishing houses, so it was never going to get published. He was a wonderful man and a charlatan, and that's okay.
How did that lead into these to one of these signpost moments?
Well, I think I read Labyrinths by Borges, which is referred to in Nicholas Roeg's what's that movie with Mick Jagger?
Anyway. Asking the wrong guy.
What? Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, I read, certainly literature was one of the first guideposts. And also, I think later on, I started to dance. I went through a long pathway of going to film school, building a house in the woods in Willits in Northern California. And then I went to Bennington College, and I had never danced. And I started to dance, and the demand to not be detached and in your head I knew it's what I needed. And I just dropped everything, and I just danced as much as I could.
Was you were talking before about the multidimensional components of the human. How did dancing activate? What parts of the multidimensional self did dancing activate in you?
Well, it's interesting. At that point, I would say I was in a different level, and I needed to come down to the real. So gravity, space, time.
Let's go through each one. Let's go through each one of those.
Well, I remember being at college, and one of my dance teachers who's still alive, Martha Whitman, she would move, and it seemed like she was going so slow and so fast that I was so in awe of it that I could not repeat the movement. So that was a very special, let's call it an inoculation. Once I got that shot, I wanted it. And
was it because your internal time rhythm wasn't there yet, or why? That's interesting. The different tempos.
Because I had never seen anybody stretch time just with movement, and when I saw it, it took me over. So my ability to be transformed at that moment is what I try to offer people. Just as I was transformed. We can have experiences, and especially as artists, especially if you have a signature thing you do, you say, okay, I'm changing, but there's something, I'm just the same. I'm continuing as I am. And really, I'm not even interested in continuing as I was 3 minutes ago. So it may be disorienting, and the ability to be disoriented, which is another, I did this thing called contact improvisation, which is a kind of dancing. And, you build up a tolerance for not knowing what's happening, not knowing where you are in time or space. And again, you're listening in a sort of regressive, if I may say, you're listening with your weight and again with touch. The thing about the visual, and I draw and I love movies and everything else, is it conjures in me a mind that wants to know things and know things as they are. And touch and music, I spent 30 years in a room often alone, and they say, how could you spend all that time alone? Well, music offers humor. It offers guidance. I was obsessed with Charles Mingus, with Thelonious Monk, and
were they still performing when you were a young man?
I missed that.
Okay, but you recognized it on the records.
Yeah, I have to say I'm one of those guys who, and really the records, I played them so often.
I probably would have missed the boat too. But the fact that, but were you dancing to Thelonious Monk?
I made a dance called Manhole Cover, which I could tell you about.
You sure that's not about Shelly Manne?
Yeah, this was about being a man, and
Right. What is that? Yeah, break that song down.
Well, it's to Just a Gigolo by Thelonious Monk. It's a solo.
Just a Gigolo.
Yeah, it's a classic cover, and that movie where he goes crazy and his descent, and it was in every note. It was in the timing. I heard a very famous musician say something very interesting lately. He said, rhythm now we're in this binary stage. So between the first note and the second note, there's no rhythm. Between the second note and the third note, there is a difference in this time, in the space between the second and the third and the first and the second, and that's where rhythm begins. Rhythm begins in that dissonance. And you know, look, if we really go to direct experience, that word that's used in Buddhism and other places, it's just chaotic data. It is our mind's ability to make form out of that allows us to exist, and there is something lost in that translation, even to thoughts, much less words.
Can you keep riffing on this whole concept of, I mean, my whole show, my fallback, Larry Beckett, the great poet who was with Tim Buckley in Anaheim. They were in the Bohemians before they plugged in, and then they did plug in. You know, my fallback is rhythm all the time. But you're talking about stretching time through movement. Can you talk about how that evolved in your repertoire, how you did that, and how you started to feel that actually?
You know, so here's the thing that a dancer does. They see someone else do movement with the idea to repeat it. Now that's good and bad, but it makes you look at it with a certain view. So if you're trying to see what they're doing, you're sort of ready to be tricked in terms of timing. And if you're watching their arms and their feet are moving, you're missing something. So you have to take in the whole thing. I made a dance that I learned completely by touch with my eyes closed. A dancer and I, and it was a 45-minute dance. And you know, we both did the movement, and there was this difference because when you learn movement by touch, you can see, you can feel what the feet are doing, but then later you have to go back and have them repeat it, and you put it together. When you look at it visually, you try to put it together immediately. So it's that taking apart of a very obvious ability to see whole movement, you know. And look, ballet started with on a proscenium stage, right? You know what that is? It's facing 180. And someone turns and they face you, and then their body turns and their head is what turns them around and brings you back again. And if you see someone like Baryshnikov who can do 10 turns, it's that coordination. So he's using his focus, his visual focus, to turn his body. Now,
you can keep. I mean, I was going to ask you about a transcendent moment on the dance stand when you left your physical body.
Well, I don't know about leaving my physical body. I do know about not knowing what I'm doing.
Can you talk about a specific early on because I mean, there's a difference between being in the studios in Bennington and then being on the bandstand or the dance stand for this matter.
Yeah, here's what I can say. So there is that time when you make something by having learned choreographic movement that someone did and you agreed upon, and so what are you moving from? You're moving from a memory of an experience. And then there's also improvising whole hog, which means you're making it up as you go. And I started with choreographed movement because it's what I could handle. And then later on, I only chose to perform improvisationally, so I'd have an idea of the content and a sort of vocabulary, but I'd make it up in the moment. And there are moments, see, this is what interests me.
Right.
There are moments.
But let's not gloss over this. How did you go from choreographed stuff? How did that evolve to go to improv? You made it seem simple. It's not.
No, it took.
So can you talk about some of those?
So here's the moment, as far as I'm concerned.
Break it down.
So I was dancing, and I saw a dance called Part. It was performed by Steve Paxton and Lisa Nelson, and it was performed to a score by Robert Ashley. It's an incredible thing. And when I saw that, I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew it's what I wanted to do, and it had everything I wanted. It had nuance, it had narrative, it had presence, it had things I can't give a word to. And basically I took years and years to be able I don't think I dance like them, and maybe I do, it doesn't matter. But to be able to go on, work on things in a way where I would perform them improvisation, where I was ready for that lack of order. So, but then the other thing that I just want to circle back, which is I've been on stage and I realize that I'm not sure what I'm doing, but it's correct to keep going.
That's the part of the multidimensional self.
Well, I could talk. I'd be happy to talk.
Just
about
riff anyway. You tell me. How do you know to keep going? What is that?
Well, what I would say is there is an internal witness, and this is phraseology from authentic movement, that is able to hold some other self that is doing something and know and give it support, and so. And it knows something. The real question is...
Well, the witness is what? Is it a voice? Is it a feeling? What is it?
It can be any of those. And, as far as I'm concerned, this is why I do, I can be sitting here and I'm watching my consciousness of how I'm looking out my eyes. So already there's a witness of how I'm using the visual sense. Or, I might say, look at the way that Jake here is holding that device. There are these two arches. Doesn't seem to have a lot of tension in his hand. I'm very impressed. And, so I'm projecting all that. How do I know that?
Right.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you're feeling. There might be lots of tension, but for me, as I look at it, it does not bring up a sense of tension.
No.
And so I go, yeah, this is good. So how we know things, I'm not going to name one way we know, or even 20 names, but we know when we know. And if I could offer anything to myself and anyone else,
yeah,
it would be a strong relationship to your sources of knowing. That's, I'm not sure about enlightenment, but I'm sure that I want to be available to all my sources of knowing.
Can you make people aware of how to tap into these sources?
So that's with the anatomy and with the movement. That's always the covert or tantric.
It's a big word in the Jake Feinberg Show, is covert versus overt racism, but that's a different thing. So go ahead.
Well, then you know what covert. It's the
Absolutely.
covert agenda.
But the peeps out watching, they may not know. So break it down for them.
Well, so I may be teaching about how the elbow works, how this bicep muscle. It's a concentric contraction, an eccentric contraction. I'm trying to get you to be able to listen, not from your mind to your body, but so what does your arm have to say? Now listen. Let me tell you something. Your arm does not speak English or anything else. Your gut, you have a gut feeling. You know something in your bones. This is already in our culture. And, but if you're going to listen to your gut, your muscle, or your bones, you're not going to be looking for English. You're going to have, it's a sense of things. So in doing the movement work, I'm always trying to get you to listen to your body, and have some experience that you haven't had before, so that already you're sourcing.
Sources of knowledge, right?
Sources of listening. So that's one way. And then with authentic movement, it's a form. It's a very particular form. There is two roles. There's a mover who closes their eyes and a witness who supports them with their attention. So to get back to your point, I'll go deeper. It is an externalized form of what we have inside of us. We all have an inner voice that explains the world and judges ourselves. So in this way, first of all, I don't know your experience. So if you close your eyes and you're moving, or if anyone does, I'm in support of a mystery. So I can just deal with the quality of my attention, because I don't know what and you can say, I feel vulnerable, my eyes are closed, this guy is looking at me. But if you trust that I know that I don't know what your experience is, then in a way, certain people come along. Our friend Douglas Smith, you know,
Legendary character.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he deserves it. He's a superstar in my book.
He's the man. But yeah, go with that.
So he knew immediately. I would say he knew immediately. There's something here for me. There's something here for me, and I'm going to make use of this. And some people, they know it immediately. Some people don't know it. Some people, their conscious mind blocks it. I had a student, and he would say, "I don't know what's happening here. I don't know what's happening here. Nothing's happening here." Great. If you need to say that with your conscious mind, I can hold that. But he kept coming back. He kept coming back for 5 years, once a week. You know, so some part of him, that's what I'm talking about, these different selves, needed to say, "I don't know." And another part of him said, "No, this is important and I'm there." And that's just like the voice that says, "I don't know what I'm doing in this movement, but it's right." And of course, when you perform, you get a hit off the audience. There's things I don't like about performance. You're in the light, they're in the dark, you know.
But when the collective consciousness is cooking,
Yeah.
that's the magic right there.
One of the moments that I love is, you know, I'm performing and I'm improvising, and someone sneezes and I go, "God bless you." And I break the wall and they go, "Oh, you mean we're part of this too?" And then it's like, "Oh, we're in it together." You know, and one of the things that I like about somewhat pretentious art, and there's lots of it, is it demands that the viewer be a participant, use their imagination, you know, not be said, "Oh, I feel better now, I saw something decorative," you know. And so there is a lot of pretentious art. I agree. Some of
But it is
I
about
love.
bringing in, it's just about connecting with humanity. I mean, you can never lose sight of it. But I want to ask you something. How did you get out of your mind with improvisation? Because even though you have a sketch, you're still thinking. Were you able to drop out of your mind more from the choreographed dance?
I'm not trying to drop out of my mind.
You mentioned though early on trying to get out of your mind.
I don't think I use those words.
You definitely didn't use those words,
Okay.
but I mean it was the
Well, what I would
perseveration
say-
that you're
well,
talking
I
about.
want to get away from the detachment of. I think it's the demand. I think it's the demand of movement. Like if you say, "Okay, I can look at it, but if I'm going to do it, you're in there and you're trying it." So, you know, it's over. That detachment is over. And you know, if you look at the other people, you know, the other people may be not as well dressed. They may be beautiful or not beautiful. They may be a different socioeconomic status, but your body goes, "That movement, yes." And you know, even the woman who started Authentic Movement, her name is Mary Starks Whitehouse, and she said, "You know, people doing exercises, you know, that's not where it's at for me." She said, "I know when someone is alive." And you know, that's not even talking about movement. There's a part of us that senses it. Again, it's that knowing, that senses.
You're talking about the eternal witness?
I'm not even going to use that.
I love that term. I mean, you've
One
already
of the-
dropped in some of these.
and I did not make that up. That's from Authentic Movement. But one of the internal witnesses, yes, one of the most important ones, knows when other people are alive and goes, "Yes, I want to be around that." And of course, some people, they're alive, you know, and they're nuts. And you go, "They're alive, and I don't know if I can be around this."
That's right.
You know, I don't know if it's safe. I don't know if it's comfortable. And then you have conflicting witnesses, which is fascinating and important. And how do you hold having conflicting agendas and witnesses? You know, what's your relationship to that? And, you know, and people say, "Oh, no, I only have to have one witness. I only have to have one agenda." When you're willing to hold two agendas or two witnesses or five, that's when you're able to have different levels of experience, right?
I'm curious about if you could talk about unconditional love and as it relates to letting the body dance. You know, what I'm getting at is this lack of authenticity in rhythm today, because the drum, you know, you have human beings playing machine parts now. And a lot of younger cats, my two daughters included, they have a hard time distinguishing between human rhythm and digital rhythm. So I wanted you to I wanted you to talk about that. I mean, do you play behind drum tracks, or has it always been behind live human beings?
Well, see, I'm trying not to be a geezer, even though I am. I'm a
No, I mean you're getting high. You're high on life. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're
but
all.
here's the point.
Yeah.
So my point is, when those people are using drum tracks, I'm trying to say, okay, that's their medium. You know, it may not be my medium. I like analog, but I'm trying to say, let's see what they do with their medium, with the drum tracks. Let's see where they go with it, and they go some incredible places.
Do you feel comfortable dancing to it?
Yes, and let me ask you a question. So if I didn't feel comfortable, but I felt motivated to move, that would be one of those conflicting agendas, and it's time for me to go do it. So, right?
I mean, it's fascinating.
Our discomfort
yeah.
is not what we should move away from.
Right.
But see, there's another voice that goes, yeah, there's something there, and there's something in breaking up the numerical, and breaking up the form that they're doing. That's important. There's chaos in there. There is chaos in the machines.
Like, how do you know that you're having an impact on people? You mentioned before the guy, even in his consciousness, was saying, I don't know why this is happening, and he kept coming back, and he kept coming back, and he kept coming back. But what are your, as a teacher, what are your metrics? How do you measure success? Is obviously the wrong word. It's just, how do you measure inspiration and loyalty?
Well, I imagine that I see people have an experience, and so I feel like I know it when it's happening, and whether they get quiet or whether they, the question is not whether they have it. So the first thing is to allow yourself to have an experience. The next thing is, when you come back to your regular life, do you erase that? Do you pop out of it and never enter that space again? Or do you make a transition where you have access to that, where you're changed, transformed by it, and you say, well, I want to do something in my life. So, I mean, you can say the guy was saying nothing was happening, but he was coming. But from my view, from my experience of doing this, when he was moving with his eyes closed, he was going some places, and he just wasn't ready to hold it in his normal life. He does work for a big tech firm, so he has a very diverse realities to hold.
You're talking about the cat that was verbally talking,
saying nothing. And
did you get off on the Merry Pranksters, Ken Kesey and those guys?
Yeah.
Can you talk? Because they like, Ken Babs is I'm obsessed with those guys. I love those guys.
I need to tell you my Ken Kesey story.
Then I knew there was one. Go ahead.
So I'm at USC Film School, and I'm taking a class.
Wow.
And he's coming into the literature department.
What year is this?
This is approximate, because I have all my own teeth, but I'm old.
Well, no, he originally, I'm trying to figure out, because he was down in Hollywood. He wanted to be a movie star. He was down in Hollywood.
This was him giving a talk.
Okay.
So he gave a talk. It was probably 75, 76, 76.
Great year.
One of those years. And it's when the Vietnamese refugees were coming into America, and he was saying what a wonderful and how poignant this is today, and not, benefit for America was the Vietnamese refugees. But so and he's talking about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Sometimes a Great Notion, and they're asking a literature question. I love those books. What's not to like? He says, well, I'm going to go get high now. Anyone going to come? And I was the only one who came.
That's awesome. So you guys went out and smoked a joint, and what happened?
I'm going to tell you. So
this is my dream,
Yeah, it was my. I think.
How come only one person? Only one. That's it.
You have to answer that. If you're going to pursue experience, you're not in the majority, Jake.
So, believe me.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think one of the hardest things about.
Let's finish the Kesey story first.
Okay. Well, I'll just say this: is accepting who you are and where you're going to fit. But anyway, so then we go and we go out and we get this disgusting blackberry brandy, and we drink a ton of it, and I'm not feeling well. 'Cause I'm a little boy. And we smoke some more, and then he's giving a talk at the baseball stadium.
Oh, this is great.
And, there's going to be 5, 8, 10,000 people there. And he says, let's go we found 2 mitts, and as the people are coming in, we just play catch. So he knew about ritual. So we're playing catch, and he's like being an American, because USC is pretty regular. Let's leave it at that.
Vanilla, straight ahead. So, nothing more.
And then he gave this incredible talk, and I'm so transformed, so to speak, by externals and internals and all the things. I'm amazed he can talk, but he gives this beautiful speech about how we have lost the Vietnam War, and the immigrants that we're getting are helping us, and such a inoculation of something healthy in America. Now,
spot on, way ahead of his time.
And before and after, because, by the way, Jake Feinberg is probably descendant of Jews, and David Hurwith certainly is. And, so if we see any difference between the immigrants now and what was happening to the Jews who were denied entrance into America on boats, I don't know where you're.
Amen. I agree.
Okay, so that's my Ken Kesey story.
So I just want to be clear. You got high with him before he gave the speech to the 10,000?
And then we spent hours drinking this disgusting brandy.
It's just such a bummer. I wish you were drinking some top shelf whiskey, but
I don't think he cared. He chose it.
I want you to talk to people. I mean, movement. We've been marinating in movement, but I just want you to talk, because you made the point earlier about. This is a tool. What I'm holding. And I'm trying to connect humanity through digital stuff, when in fact it can be a real, like you said, it can be a disservice.
Just want to say, people, that as he was talking, he gestured like this with his hand. Now, I don't think his conscious mind chose that, but I picked it up.
Yeah, it's just part of...
Okay, so there was some message there for me, whether his conscious mind was intending it or not.
And you really did a great job, because I'm struggling to come up with what I wanted to ask you. But can you talk about how people can continue to? When did it become apparent to you that movement was going to allow you to have a singular purpose in life?
I don't know what singular purpose means. I can say that by moving, I was transformed over time. And I have to say, I began to have an art career. And the thing about, and musicians have the same thing, you become a caricature of yourself if you're repeating the same thing. Now, some people can do it, and they bring their soul to it every time you see them perform. B.B. King, man, every time I saw him, it was the best.
But it was a formula, but it was not, it was the same. I was just listening to an interview with Jerry Garcia. He said, and he was just talking about the same thing. He's like, it's neat, first time around. You got all the the lasers, and it's fun. But Pete Townsend, at one point in the Who's career, they had played the same show for 5 straight years.
Yeah.
That's a burn.
I can't do that.
Did you ever burn, or did you always bounce out of it?
I had a deal where I was performing like 2 days and then traveling one for months. And at a certain point I said, I'm not doing anything I know how to do the next night. So we'd be on the plane, and I'd, make up something. And, I just, and producers were not happy about it and the like. But, I was, so that's a level of risk. But for me, at this point, I have to tell you that I realized that I'm not even interested in making something to present anymore. I go in a dance studio, I did this morning, and I don't ask myself, I don't move and go, so what can I take for this and use it this way? I'm just saying, look, express yourself now. Now it's harder, it's less moored by any viewpoint, and I'm trying to be there, present in this moment, and being expressive for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, and it may be, did I move, did I not move? Yes, I moved some, and I have some memory. I'm not trying to remember it anymore. Where I am at now, and this is important to me, is that every person is perfectly expressive and functional in their movement all the time. So sometimes, you're working with someone's body and you're trying to heal them, but if they have something to express and it's in their muscles, it's in their tissue, it's in their nerves, which have consciousness, then what they have to express gets in the way of function, much less the way we're leading our lives and our habits. And so I'm not in the business anymore. I'm just in the business of trying to be present with my consciousness and your consciousness. And I have these pathways that I'm offering to people. And, it's not for everybody, but some people seem to want it. And whoever is supposed to be there is there. And, the thing about it is that I'm moved. And I'm a very lazy person. But when I'm really interested in something, it's not a function of discipline. It's a function of, I think you used the word inspiration, which inspiration for me, inspire, respire. At the end of the exhale, if you wait, if you have again. So
yeah, I just turned 40 years old, so I'm still sort of maybe I just use that as an idealistic term.
No, nothing wrong with the word inspiration. I'm 63, and I'm done having a career, but I'm not done relating to people.
So what's the right word? Not inspiration. What was the word you used?
Well, respiration is breathing.
I dig.
Yeah, but inspiration is there's no problem with the word inspiration.
No, and I'm going to still use it very proudly. But I always, when I interviewed Stanley Clarke, I've done a couple interviews with him, and he always talked. He goes, one of the best kept secrets in music is that the rhythm sections, and he was speaking about mainly melodic improvisation. Some people call that jazz. Is that the real increasers in musical vocabulary are the rhythm sections? Is there a dance vocabulary, and do you feel that you've added to it? Can you expand the vocabulary of dance, David Hurwith?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know if anyone can.
Even through improv?
I don't, I'm as I look back, and at this age, it's kind of a relief. I don't think I was such a great dancer. I was okay. I had some good ideas. I think I was interesting, and I've seen some people expand the vocabulary. Steve Paxton totally expanded the vocabulary.
In what way? To the layperson.
First of all, he understands stillness. He understands he's willing to be bored and boring. And he's willing to go into a state and assume that those people who are ready to see it will see it. I don't know, or maybe he doesn't even care about that. I don't know, but he certainly changed the vocabulary of people, and then I think it's moved into the mainstream. I see Michael Jackson. Have you ever seen him go slow when he's dancing? He holds you in this amazing way. Now, he's using a vocabulary that is well known. I don't know. Steve Paxton did. I'm not trying to add to the vocabulary. I'm trying to do some personal things here with some people I'm working with. I'm moving my context down. I'm also very involved in the crucible of family, and so that's an important one.
I mean, do you think people should stay in domesticated relationships if there's no soul in those relationships?
I don't know what other people should do. I have no idea, but I will say.
But the crucible of the family. What are your tenets? So you don't have to judge other people.
I would put it this way. For me, I had a family, and it was good and bad and everything, and I checked out as soon as I could. And I checked out with the television. I got on the road as soon as I could, 18. So now I'm having a family again. And there are moments where it feels soulless, and there are moments when I hate the role I'm in. I'm the spurned lover. I'm the, what else, I can't, any of the above. And the thing is, just like those 4 o'clock times, it's time to go through that. Time to be available when later in the day I'm the beloved one. So,
What's the process of getting to a point of where you can handle that in a mature fashion?
As soon as I know, I'll tell you. But
let me know too.
But you know, I think you have to decide you want it, and you also, you know, the good thing about family, you know, it's just very obvious. You do something great, it goes on. You do something bad, it goes on. So the repetition, our friend Prince, the joy in repetition. You get to do things over and over, and then you find meaning into it. And you know, whether that becomes ritual, then you can call it ritual. How does form give you a context to find soul or meaning or the like? You know, and how much emptiness, you know, when you say soul, you've used that word, and I rarely use it, but it's not that I don't feel it, but it just doesn't, I mostly need quiet to feel soul. And, you know, so I need less busyness at this point in my life to feel my soul, and the forms that I'm using, I sense people's soul, but you know, sometimes soul is in the doing. You know, talking, even though I'm talking a lot, as we know, some people are impressive talkers, but if is their agenda to show you how much they know? I'm trying to invite you to go towards yourself.
I mean, absolutely, and but is it a delicate balance? Is it something you've had to work on, or is that something? I mean,
it's something I failed at over and over.
This is my, as we wrap up set one here with David Hurwith. It's been a mind-blowing experience. Can you develop sources of knowing at 63, at 73, at 80, or is it stuff that is it an eternal search, similar to the notes that Mingus and Monk were always searching for? Is it the eternal search, or can you develop sources of knowing at any age?
Yes, and here's what I would say. I would say, how do you develop the personal power? Are you building your personal power, or are you diminishing it? And, you know, are you distracting yourself from what you need to look at, or are you meeting it? Not whether you're succeeding or failing, but absolutely, I'm curious. Anyway, we're very safe. The dog is protecting us.
No, just keep going. You're doing great.
So, so what are your habits? How are you spending each moment? And is it developing your personal power to be the way you want to be, the deeper way you want to be, not the egotistical way you want to be? So sometimes being quiet, you know, sometimes with my family, I don't know what to say. I don't say anything. That's as powerful as I can be in that moment, you know, is just to be quiet and accepting the limitations that you have.
And it can get very stifling, but we will explore that in set two. Big thanks to Douglas for connecting us. He's probably somewhere on the lavender farm, but David Hurwith, was an honor to rap with you, brother. Thanks for being part of the program.
Yay.